I want to know what you think about control. Obviously, you alluded to it a few times. You have alluded to it a few times in general, and the things you can control when the fans get canceled, and then the things you can control when volleyball itself gets canceled. And I want to know what the philosophy on the team was and what your philosophy is towards control.
Yeah, so the year before in Laval, that was a huge theme for us. It was actually brought up by he coaches on the island, Abe Vender. I don't know if you know him,
Nope.
but he comes to our nationals every year. He's a Cairo guy, so he comes to our nationals for the weekend. He's hilarious, but he was big on like controlling what you can control. Like, and we talk about this all the time. Like, okay, what you can control? What you can control, like your body language. You can control like the words you say, like how good of a teammate you are. You can control all the work you put in and the preparation you do, but you can't control the fans. You can't control the bad call by the ref. You can't control what the other team says. And yeah, and that was just a huge kind of, I think, philosophy for us that would just keep us grounded um, and connected. Like even if guys were playing bad, they had the choice to be a good teammate, and the guys who were playing good had a choice to build up the guys who maybe were struggling. So all about like choices and just knowing what you can choose and how your decisions will affect others. I think, especially I remember in my third year, that was just a huge theme. And I think it just like makes everything like put in a perspective, because I think there's so many athletes that go out and get so frustrated at what the ref does, or like at some emotional thing that really makes them play worse in the end.
Mm.
And I think that's the biggest part about it is control you can control, because you don't want to get sucked in by all the other BS essentially. Like
Mhm.
that's what it is in my opinion.
I remember in your third year in the semis versus TRU, um, in the it was the game, like it was the last game, and it was it was super frustrating for me. I was on the bench, but watching you guys play as a team, I think it was one of the only games of the year that you hit negative or close to it. I don't think Jesse was having a good game. Um, Aaron was going off, and Jackson was going off, and or no, it would have been Aaron and no, Pierce
Is
was
there
hurt,
in
so
person?
it was Aaron and Jackson. Um,
Hmm.
and then Kern was having an okay game, and I remember being frustrated because our team would come in and everyone would be kind of down because we'd be down, and it was this weird feeling of like we're not losing to like superstars right now. Like Lepke and Elser are not doing great, but it was frustrating to see our body language compared to yours, because you guys were always so engaged with each other
Hmm.
and super upright and supportive. And it didn't look like you were having a bad game or Jesse was having a bad game or Kern was having an okay game. It's like we're losing to two really good middles right now, and it looks like we're like being smacked around by the entire team.
Hmm. That's super cool. Yeah, I think that's another kind of mantra that um, always kind of rings in my ears is play the day. So it's just it's a golfing analogy. I don't know if you golf, but sometimes you'll go on the course and like you'll be slicing, and you kind of got to play that shot. You got to maybe like play your slice, and other days you'll be hitting a draw. So just really, if I'm like maybe struggling a little bit offensively, and I got to still choose like, okay, I'm struggling offensively, but I can still really dial it in on reception. I can still like cheer on my guys and like
Mm-hmm.
put in good energy, and I can still like talk and like talk about strategy and stuff. Like I'm so that even if I'm struggling a little bit with spike, and then I can think of like, okay, if I'm struggling, maybe I'll go to a little more like wipe dunk game. Just get some recycles so we can run the middle or something. So I think those two go hand in hand. Like okay, that's not going well for me. I can control if I can choose to get frustrated with this, or I can choose to just like let it be and focus on other things that are going to help the team.
Mhm.
Um, because I think all of us, I'm not out there to be good, just me. Like I'm out there to win as a team. And if I have to have a bad game hitting percentage wise, like it doesn't matter to me. I'd rather win as a team. Um, yeah, that's what I think I got to say to that. I remember that game now. I was frustrated with myself after, but
Mhm.
uh, during the game, I was like really just trying to just like pour in to the other guys.
Yeah, well, I remember you had Dobbert, who's arguably one
Yeah.
of the best players to come out of like NCAA. I think he was probably better than Patch while he was at BYU. And the
Yeah.
guy's just a freak. He's like super smart, huge, massive dude. And then I think Jesse had Napolitano, who's one of the best opposite side blockers I've ever seen.
Hmm.
So yeah, but you guys just know you played your role, and there's this book called Zen Mind Beginner's Mind by this guy Shunryu Suzuki, and he talks about control in like the only way to control someone is by encouraging them to be themselves and allowing them to be, he calls it mischievous. Like you want people to kind of have the freedom to do what they do. And he talks about, so the way to control a herd of cattle is
Hmm.
not to put it into corrals. You don't want to put them into tiny little pens where you have complete control over everything you do, or else they'll rebel. What you want to do with a cow and a herd of cattle is to put them into a big open field and put a fence around that big open field, because then they have this, you're controlling the place that they can move around in, but you're giving them this kind of illusionary control where
Hmm.
you're encouraging them to move around and be themselves, but they're in this larger framework.
Oh man, I love that. You got a lot of books you need to send me.
Yeah, man, I'll put together a list.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool thing. I think that's so true. I think that almost goes back to what we were talking about earlier with like that's the same principle as being free.
Hmm.
Like with an athlete, if you just put them in like no, you can only do this and this and this, and you can't do this, then it's not gonna let them grow and be free. It goes along with it totally.
Yeah, I think that's really tough as an athlete, and I think it's a lot of pressure as a coach to allow for freedom because you have to watch so much failure.
Right.
Like my good friend Ken McLaughlin, he does the whole pursuit volley thing, and one of their principles, they have three principles, and one of their principles is finding a different way to approach failure and fear, and how you shouldn't have this fear of failure because like you need to fail to become better. It's, you see
Hmm.
it time and time again in lots of autobiographies and any personal anecdotal stuff. There's always this failure before you achieve something. Like nobody walks into a gym and is immediately an all-star. Like
Right.
there's a process to get there, and there's lots of, like I talked a little bit about it earlier with the acetylcholine and norepinephrine, how you need to fail, and that's how you, like you're, by failing you're approximating the things that work.
Yeah.
So if you fail, you realize that didn't work. And I don't know, a good example is like with a um, like when you're playing with a kid, like a young kid,
Hmm.
and like you're kind of playing tag, or they're trying to slap you around or something, and you're constantly moving your hands away, and then occasionally you let them hit you, and then they get a little bit better, and then you get a little bit faster,
Yeah.
and then they're constantly chasing. It's this game of cat and mouse where you're pulling them, and all they're also pushing themselves to achieve that goal. And then it's actually cool because there's this other neurochemical dopamine, which is it's a um, reward based on external motivation. So
Right.
it's things outside of ourselves. Serotonin is something that's, like you talked a little bit about posturing, and serotonin
Hmm.
controls posture, and that's the feeling that we're okay where we're at right now. So
Hmm.
so if you're at the, like a chimpanzee at the top of a dominance hierarchy has the highest serotonin, its chest is always out, it's stoked, whereas something at the bottom, it doesn't want to be there, it's really curled in. But so
Hmm.
dopamine is this neurotransmitter that enables us to understand that we want something outside of ourselves, and it rewards us for reaching for that thing outside of ourselves. And
Right.
so that's the feeling that when the kid actually strikes your hand, then they get a release of dopamine. They're like, whoa, that was really sweet. And then
Hmm.
that encourages them to keep going. So it's this positive feedback loop, but you have to fail to get that dopamine release. And then once
Right.
you succeed, dopamine release, and then you're more okay with failure because you know that that's part of the process, at least from a neurochemical perspective.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so cool, man. Oh.